It seems that despite our calls for reform to protect the rights of Americans, the TSA just won't quit. Recently at a checkpoint, a 6-year-old girl was subjected to the infamous invasive pat-down procedure. Take a look.
I don't want to get my clothes. One hand on your other leg. You're going all the way up. And I'll be going not all the way up on her, but coming down the slide. And right here with mommy's at. Turn around and face me. I want to do thank you. Your legs out. Step right here. Step out. Turn the entire body, okay? Pretty hands. Around. Arm. Side. Waist. One hand in the waistband. Just a minute. And then the sensitive area, I'm touching the back of my hand. Okay? Oh, it's cute. We're going all the way up. It's coming down. You come over here, sweetie. Right here. Same thing with a waist. My hand in a waist. All the way up. All the way up. Sensitive area, too. Right here. Thank you. Yeah, that's it. Just that. Let's go in.
They're doing the drug test on her, the whatever test.
I understand.
On the 6-year-old.
Yeah, that's their job.
Run this one over there. Run that over there. Run that in there.
Now, does this look like the face of a terrorist? Or maybe I should ask you, who is doing the terrorizing here? Look at her. She's scared, and she's looking to her mother for help against the blue shirt Nazis as they grope her. You know, as if that's not crazy enough, Yahoo News reported this week that parents who have children at the Little Village Academy Public School will no longer be allowed to bring a lunch to school. They will instead be forced to buy a lunch in the school cafeteria or go hungry. What does this country become? Should we start tasering children now? Oh wait, children are being tasered. Remember in March of 2010, 2 Martinsville, Indiana police officers tasered a problem child at Tender Teddy's daycare because the child wouldn't quit kicking and screaming. The police were called to the scene after a worker dialed the police, reporting the child was acting in a manner that threatened the safety of the other kids. Why is it that I must report these types of stories? Travel checkpoints, state-forced diets, and tasering of children? So let me ask you, where will this nation be in 5 years? I want to hear your answer. Send it to feedback@freedom.tv. You can tweet us at Reality Report. You can also find us on Facebook, or you can leave your comment on our RTR.org group. I really want to hear your thoughts on the course of this nation, because we need to put an end to these abhorrent abuses of freedom. That's why we do the Reality Report. Welcome to this edition of the Reality Report. Coming up, we have a clip from an exclusive interview with the founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, Richard Gage. He visited the studio this week to tell us about the collapse of the World Trade Center complex. Mark Anderson of the American Free Press also joins us to talk about the Bretton Woods II meeting that he attended. The Reality Report viewer poll is back, and we also talked to Wayne Madsen, and he gives us an update on Washington, D.C. As always, we dip into the mailbag and brand another enemy of the state. But first, let's go to Angie with today's headlines.
Thanks, Gary. This past Saturday, the people of Iceland voted down a bailout of their banking corporations. Despite pressure applied by the International Monetary Fund, among others, 60% of Icelandic people struck down a proposal to repay money swindled from Icelandic banks. Following Saturday's outcome, Iceland's prime minister warned her country about possible repercussions by the banksters and the European unions, and said, "We must do all we can to prevent political and economic chaos as a result of this outcome." Now the matter goes to a court battle which may last up to a year. Although the congressional leaders agreed to a 6-month budget to keep the government from shutting down, there will be yet another vote this week on cutting another $38.5 million. It's called the Path to Prosperity, outlined by House Budget Committee Chairman Republican Paul Ryan of Wisconsin. The plan will reduce government spending by hundreds of billions of dollars in the coming decade. It is said to help create jobs, stop the government from overspending, and get rid of the country's debt. Obama's current budget plan would impose a $1.5 trillion tax hike and add $9.1 trillion to the national debt over the next 10 years. We know radiation has been found in the air on the West Coast from the nuclear crisis in Japan, but now radiation has been found in drinking water and in milk in more than 13 U.S. cities. The EPA's standard maximum contaminant level for radiation is 3.0 picocuries per liter. Vermont was the first place to report cesium-137 in their milk. They had a sample that contained 1.9 picocuries. Phoenix reported 3.2 picocuries, and the Los Angeles sample contained 2.9. This is a list of all the cities reporting radioactive iodine-131 to be found in the drinking water. This list includes 3 towns in Tennessee, 3 towns in Ohio, and 2 cities in New Jersey. Although the EPA standard maximum is 3, this is still a conservative standard, and these levels are said not to pose a health threat. The Libyan government said the African Union have come to a peace agreement ending the Libyan conflict. South African President Jacob Zuma spoke with the current Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi over the weekend in Tripoli. A rebel spokesman stated that there would be no truce unless Gaddafi withdrew his forces and stepped down as leader. The African Union's main points for the deal are an immediate ceasefire, the unhindered delivery of humanitarian aid, a dialogue between the government and rebels on a political settlement, the protection of foreign national and the suspension of NATO airstrikes. The African Union Commissioner for Peace and Security says they will be up to the Libyan people to choose their leaders. Those are today's headlines. I'm Angie Ress. Gary?
Thank you, Angie. Earlier this week, we had a very special guest here in the RTR studios, Richard Gage, the member of the American Institute of Architects and founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. He stopped by to tell us about his Midwest tour and about the mystery behind the collapse of Building 7.
Well, we point out that first of all, there's 3 skyscrapers that collapse on 9/11. Most people are completely unfamiliar with the third worst structural failure in modern history. This is Building 7, a 47-story skyscraper about a football field in length away from the Twin Towers. It was not hit by an airplane, and yet at 5:20 in the afternoon begins a precipitous, sudden, straight-down, symmetrical collapse almost into its own footprint and at free-fall acceleration. Now, what does that sound like to you?
Well, it sounds to me like a classic Las Vegas-style controlled demolition.
And we put them side by side together. You can see them going down. You can't tell any difference. So it doesn't take an architect or an engineer to see that these are controlled demolitions. And yet we're told by NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, that these are this building was destroyed by fire. Normal office fires, they say, with a new phenomenon called thermal expansion.
For more on the Midwest Truth Tour and Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, visit ae911truth.org. Over this past weekend, the economic elite gathered in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire for a meeting now known as Bretton Woods 2. American Free Press editor Mark Anderson was in attendance, and he let us know what happened.
Well, me and an AFP associate went up there April 10, Sunday, really behind on sleep. We got up there by hook or crook. There was no media there. What we didn't see is just as significant as what we did see. The first Bretton Woods Conference in 1944 had the leaders of 44 nations there, many of whom got out on the lawn and posed for group photographs for the press. Lots of press activity. What we didn't see was any press whatsoever. You would think there'd be a couple of news crews, local or national, parked along the long driveway off of Highway 302, but it was just deserted. You would never know there was a conference going on there of this magnitude, save for one lonely protester who put up signs such as "George Soros, take a hike," George Soros is a Marxist, and so on. So we talked to the townsfolk, most of whom were unaware or only vaguely aware of something going on there, because there were large, polished black limousines popping up here and there now and then. And the press of any kind of disagreeable press or press they perceived to be quizzical of what they're doing, and the public, of course, was completely barred. It kind of mimicked the annual Bilderberg meetings in many ways, although more low-key.
For more information on the secretive Bretton Woods II meeting and Mark Anderson's investigation, please visit AmericanFreePress.net. The presidential race is heating up with announcements coming, and seeing as most of our viewers are Ron Paul fans, we thought we'd ask you, what is your preferred presidential ticket? In this week's Reality Report viewer poll made possible by PatriotPolls.com. Who should be Ron Paul's running mate? Ron Paul and Rand Paul? Ron Paul Jesse Ventura? Ron Paul Tom Woods? Or Ron Paul Judge Napolitano? This week you can cast your vote at RTR.org. Speaking of Washington, D.C., we spoke to Wayne Madsen this week, and he gave us the update on the budget battle.
I think what we're seeing play out here is something I was warned about by a former Obama advisor, financial advisor, economic advisor, I should say, back in November, that what we would see happen with these austerity moves. Now, these are no different than what's taking place in Greece and France and Iceland and Ireland, where the people who are relying, who paid their taxes, and people on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, whatnot, are now being forced to bail out the shyster bankers who have basically looted the banks and the national treasuries, the central banks, and now want the taxpayers to take the fall, bail them out. So what we're seeing here is the Republicans and some of the corporate Democrats just in kind of line with each other, cutting different programs, but they want to pass this hurt on to the taxpayers when in fact they ought to be soaking the billionaires, even to the point of seizing some of their bank accounts and assets like their yachts and private aircraft.
Find out more about the budget battle and Wayne himself, go to WayneMadsenReport.com. And now it's time for the mailbag, where last week we asked you, do you think Obama is doing a good job of handling the situation in Libya? All right, we're going to start off with Stephen B., who sent us an email. And he said, Obama is handling the situation in Libya like he does everything else, following the script that has been fed to him. This is Obama's most brazen act of tyranny yet. Carl D. from Pennsylvania says, I feel Barry Soetoro, a.k.a. Obama, has led the U.S. into a war of wills. The ideology that he has used is contrary to our policy in the world today. We also have part of a letter written to Lieutenant Jennifer Griffin. Remember the officer who lied to a man about his basketball hoop? Eric D. told her this: I demand that you apologize to your citizen and you and your municipality give back the private property that you stole from him. I would hope that you resign your post, but I bet you will receive an award for your disgusting display of a violation of our Constitution. And now it's time to brand some unlucky soul the enemy of the state. Who is this week's victim? It's John McCain. Why? Because McCain believes that the think tank and advocacy group, the Goldwater Institute, is disgraceful and basically blackmailing because they plan on suing to ensure the Arizona state constitution is upheld. You see, McCain wants to see the Arizona taxpayers foot the $97 million bill to manage a privately owned sports arena in Glendale, Arizona. I love the smell of fascism in the morning. That's all we have for you this week, my friends. You see that share button down there? Come on, give it a click and share this report on your connected networks. Isn't it time that you became a leader at RTR.org? For the Reality Report, I'm Gary Franchi.